Yeah, just don't get
and how to space these children. Family planning is giving individuals really a choice of deciding if wanting to have kids or not. And contraception makes this possible. So really, when I want you to listen to this presentation is with a thought in mind of how can family planning be part of our equation as organization working in conservation. So I always want for you to reflect back on that. And these are just some of the areas that we as TNC work on, but I'm sure many of you can relate in terms of our conservation agenda, with it protecting land, tackle climate change, provide food and water sustainably, conserve forests, and build healthy cities. But how can we really think about family planning constructively within that scenario? Yeah. So really, people and planet are connected, and I think this photo shows that well. You might not be able to see it so well as much as us, but here you have some wildlife, and in the background you have agriculture going on. And we really rely on our planet for various things, resources, food, oxygen, natural resources, biodiversity, but also the planet is reliant on the way we treat it as well. And so there has really been an imbalance from what we take from the environment and what we give back. So really, there's this sense of urgency to allow the planet to heal, and we've there's really been this disconnect in the way that we allow the planet to regenerate and heal itself. So now we are around 7.7 billion people in the world, and around 50% are living at less than $2.50 a day, and so that's a lot of people. And so this is really an unsustainable development trajectory. So we need to really create a more equitable world and to restore this balance between people and nature. So for example, just to put up, to show you the inequality is that 41% of all pregnancies in the world are unintended. And that really shows that would be, in 2015, the number that was shown was that would be 92 million people. And a lot of these pregnancies, then around 50% of them end in abortion, because these women do not have access to family planning methods. So to the next slide, that means that we have 214 million women that have unmet need for modern contraception, and that's maybe a fancy word of saying is that they would like not to get pregnant, but they're not using contraception. And so that's quite a lot of people. That really shows the inequality that exists. So just to take you back to think of why family planning can be a solution and how it can be linked to human health and quality of human life, but also to conservation, I just want to go through some of the points here, but I can point you to other resources that are out there. So, for example, family planning can be part of a solution to advance human rights, giving women a choice to decide what to do with their lives, whether to continue education, continue working, and giving them the options. It helps reduce poverty. It improves nutritional outcomes. So, for example, if women have children too close apart, that's very detrimental for their health, or can be. It helps save lives. It has shown that giving access to family planning has direct impact on maternal and child survival. It prevents further HIV transmission, whether it's from mother to child or for between people. It supports women's and gender education, as I said, and advances gender equality and empowerment. it can really be a solution to allow access to water and sanitation, reduce waste because there is less people there, helps address climate change, protect marine resources, and mitigate deforestation and unhealthy interaction between human, domestic animals, and wildlife. Well, it also can contribute to economic growth. Rapid population growth increases the number of poor people out there, so there is this imbalance between economic growth. And I will give you some example of my own country, Tanzania, which is one of the 10 countries in Africa that is doing very well in its economy, but overall our GDP has been going down. It contributes to peace and stability because of the threat between wildlife and humans, for example, and it supports the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal. But overall, evidence suggests that family planning in itself is one of the most cost-effective development interventions. And for example, one of the stats that's been shown is that with every dollar spent on family planning, up to $4 is saved on maternal and newborn care. So going back to the individual to let you understand how this impacts women specifically is, we might not hear this often enough, but every pregnancy is a risk for a woman. In countries where we live, it might put a woman at risk during the pregnancy, before the pregnancy, or after the pregnancy, so you're avoiding your health risk. It might cause her to decide to have an abortion if she does not want that child. As I said before, the nutritional depletion, if a woman has children too close apart, then her body does not have the time to heal. If she also has children too close apart, there's more, she has less time to take care of her other children and breastfeed the children as well, which has shown to impact infants as well. Overall, the well-being and quality of a life is also impaired. And also, if we think about a healthy person, the immediate need is coming about improving your own health. But then you have, once you're feeling better, and then you can think about other things for conservation and environment as well. So it's linked to women empowerment as well as economic of the household. If women decide to have less children, then that money can be used in other things within the household as well. In regard to the child itself, usually access to family planning, or when children are spaced too close apart, there is the possibility of being more prone to having low birth weight children, stillbirth, preterm, also the link to malnutrition, and reduce the likelihood of being breastfed, as I said, and access to education. Often, where there are many children in a family, the family and the household might not prioritize certain children, and often is girl children, to continue their education. So they might be pulled out of school, and sometimes they might be forced to work as well. So impact on society, obviously the human loss aspect of it, loss of productivity, the medical costs, and also the fact that, if we spend less money on family planning and it's causing other issues, then there's competing with other resources as well. So I just now want to take you to Tanzania, which is where I come from. You will often hear me refer it as us and mine, because I've lived there for 23 years, so it's home now. And I just wanted to give you, when we think about how family planning can be relevant to conservation, for us to really think of some of the challenges we might be facing in terms of family planning and implementation. And I would like to share some of these. I had the opportunity to speak to 14 organizations in Tanzania, and they gave me their insights of what some of their challenges are in terms of implementing family planning programs. So to take you to Tanzania, which some of it looks like this, Lucy's here, so she can tell you more about it. So we are very, very fortunate to have a country as beautiful as Tanzania, and I hope some of you will come and visit us. So a third of our country is protected, and that's one of the highest ratio in the world. 50% of our land is covered by forests and woodlands. We have two huge lakes. One is Lake Victoria, which is the largest lake in Africa. And over 80% of the country's economy depends on the environment. This is either tourism, agriculture, natural resources, so it's heavily dependent on the environment. But yet, 70% of the population lives in rural areas. So this really shows why TNC is working to preserve such a beautiful country, but it also makes us think about our future as Tanzania. So to give you some development indicators of what Tanzania is like, so our current population is 60 million people, but by 2050, we're expected to go to 138 million. So that's a very high population increase. Like most African countries and developing countries, we have a very, very young population, where 62% of our population is under 24 years of age. And we still have a high fertility rate. So on average, women will have 5.2 children during their lifetime. And yet, when looking in demography, and some of you might be aware that with the young population also often comes a lot of young pregnancies. So 57% of our 19-year-olds are pregnant or have already had a child. So that means that's why we have such a high population growth rate. Although that happens, our contraception prevalence rate is only 32%. So that means only 32% of women who are married are currently using contraception, but 20 to 24% more people would like to be using it, but are not using it. So if we would give access to those extra 24%, that means nearly 50% of people will be using contraception that would want to. So this map really shows you the modern contraceptive use in the country. So we have areas where contraceptive use is pretty high. That's around here. This is the map of Tanzania, and of women of reproductive age. And also you have areas that there is limited access or use of family planning. And these are more remote locations. And so access is a big problem. And it's also where we have, so this is Lake Tanganyika is around here. And here we have the natural conservation areas up there. And so this is just to show that this is the areas where TNC happens to be working, not because contraceptive use is low, but also it happens to be where there's areas of rich interest in conservation work. Here I just wanted to share with you what I learned are some of the challenges for implementers working in family planning, those who think family planning is important. And a lot of the time you find that is organizations that specifically deal in health. And so I wanted to, for those of you thinking of including family planning into your program, what are some of the challenges that you might come across? So for example, in our country currently, we have a lot of conflicting messages from the leadership about the benefits of family planning. Most of our national policies still promote and have identified family planning to be a key solution to improving the country and towards the sustainable development goals. But these conflicting messages have really had detrimental effects in terms of how family planning has been perceived, but also how implementers are then being able to do their work. So we've had fragmented government support, and a lot of people in the leadership are behaving, whether it's in to progress, fast-track their political career, or whether it's in their own personal agenda that they're going towards rather than the benefits of the national consensus, or really reacting out of fear for that. So these are some of examples of what is happening. So for example, there has been a district commissioner that has that stated that he would put people in jail who were providing family planning services to youth in school, which does not really correlate to our national policies right now. So there's been a mismatch in terms of conflicting messaging. This has had detrimental effects in terms of knowing, like civil servants and healthcare providers, in terms of knowing how to act. So for example, we've heard of resources being taken away from family planning in terms of purchasing commodities because people are unsure about how family planning will be viewed in the future. So deciding to reallocate those funding to more pressing health demands like HIV/AIDS or malaria, for example. There are competing priorities. In our country, we have limited resources, and so family planning often is not seen as an immediate need. So things like HIV/AIDS, maternal health, chronic illnesses might end up taking more resources than family planning. And right here, I put a really nice quote from the executive director of Amati, which is working in family planning in Tanzania. And what he says is that you cannot expect someone in a remote community to walk for 20 kilometers to the nearest clinic just to have access to family planning services when they do not have an immediate health problem. This is the time taken away from their other immediate needs. You must bring the services directly to them. This is the time you might be taking from them working in the fields or working in livestock. So it might not be something that they see the need of right there and then. And so this is what I meant when talking about competing priorities. We are facing funding unpredictability because there seems to be a lack of a unified vision. People are thinking differently about the direction of family planning. And obviously, donors are noticing this lack of commitment. And as I said, government employees are uncertain of how to allocate resources. And this has detrimental effects on family planning because we've had great gains in Tanzania recently, but if this continues, that family planning might really fall through the gap. Some of you may know this, but there are often traditional beliefs and social norms that make it challenging for family planning implementers to implement their work and improve access to family planning services. Practices such as early marriage, high teenage pregnancies, expectations in the community to have children, sometimes early, high number of children, and men really as the decision makers in the household, and often being the one less informed about what family planning is and how it can improve the lives not only of women or the household as well. Another detrimental thing is myths and misconceptions. In our community, there are myths, people misunderstanding entirely how family planning can better improve their health or their situation. And some of these are listed here. For example, the pill causes cancer. You cannot get pregnant the first time you have sex. Some contraception causes infertility. IUCDs can get lost in the uterus. Implants get lost in the body. Condoms have holes in them. And this is things that really have repercussion on how family planning is perceived. And this is definitely not necessarily the fault of the individual who believes these things, but sometimes we don't spend enough time with healthcare providers to adequately inform the client about how family planning might have different benefits for the woman, but the side effects entirely as well. In Tanzania, we also see stock out of family planning commodities because there is prioritization towards other life-saving drugs. But this can really also cause discontinuation. If, for example, I walk to a clinic thinking that I might want an IUCD, and I go or might want, for example, an injectable, and I go there and I don't find it there, then next time I might not go again, or I might stop using family planning altogether. So this causes discontinuation, the fact of commodities not being there. And also it fuels negative misconception and trust in family planning. You might go to take up to decide to use family planning, but then it's not there. Or you might wait a little longer to have your injections when the injectable comes in at the facility, and it happens that you're already pregnant. So you might think that family planning method did not cover you, but it was because it was not there previously, so you were pregnant at the time you received it. There is also limited capacity to correctly forecast by healthcare providers to think of like how many quantities of commodities that might need from their localities. So this is a systematic issue as well. And also there's shortages of healthcare providers. This is a big problem in Tanzania, and only 40% of our health posts are filled. So there's a big deficit of human resources. That means there is limited capacity of those providers working in the facilities that we have. Usually you find providers that are less educated or are able to provide less services. So because there is so few of them, also this gives them less opportunity to advance in their education and be able to provide more, for example, long-acting message rather than shorter-acting message. And because there are so few of them, they first cater for emergency cases. So, for example, if you have one healthcare provider in a dispensary working there, and you have 20 people who come in all at once, he might first take care of the emergency situation and then do family planning later. So this has also detrimental repercussion on providing access to family planning. Wow, I did. So I know I threw a lot of information right there at you. So I don't know if you have any questions for me now. And I hope I have a question for us to discuss, maybe, if there are no questions, but I'm happy to take any questions. And if there's others who can help me in the room to answer this question, I will welcome that too.
Okay, so remember that in order So let me just quickly, for the online participants, we're going to take a couple of questions here in the room, and then we'll go to the folks that are online. We can try unmuting yourself and asking the question directly, or if you prefer, you can use the chat box. Got it?
So thank you very much for the presentation. It's really exciting to see that TNC Africa has a family planning advisor position, because I think it makes it clear the organization understands the link. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your job description or your terms of reference, or what you'll be doing, how you will help the organization promote PHE.
Should I do one-to-one?
Whichever you like, just make sure you listen.
Okay. Did everyone understand that? So Danan from Conservation International. Yeah. So was asking me what is my job description as family planning advisor at TNC. So I've recently joined, and that's in mid-February. So I've been with TNC nearly 4 months now. And so really and it's great that TNC has seen a need for a position such as myself, because that means that there are more organizations out there that are thinking of working in different sectors, so across sectors. And so what I really will be doing is to try and advocate for people to see that link between population and environment. So part of my job would be to make people see, to educate people on that link, to create awareness within fields that do not necessarily understand. So for example, working with the natural resources and being part of the Ministry of Natural Resources, for example, as someone who does health or family planning, and vice versa. And in Tanzania, for example, we see this more now, where there is a need, and people really realize that family planning is not a standalone thing. It has to be integrated into other sectors as well. So advocacy, capacity building, raising awareness, and really trying to think of how TNC can decide to integrate more family planning within its programs across the board, starting with Africa.
Anyone else have a question in the room? And if you could just introduce yourself, that would be great.
My name is Renika, and I'm interning for the Jane Bell Institute over the summer.
Yeah.
And my question is, how do you gain community trust with sensitive information with the myths that are preconceived and with social norms going on? And if you try reaching out to the community through their representatives, or how exactly do you deliver that information to them?
Okay. So the question was, when it comes to working with the community, how do we approach sensitive information with them? Yeah. And from my experience working in the community, and Cara, Lucy, maybe you can add to what I have to say, is that in Tanzania specifically, if you want to have long-lasting impact, you have to include the leadership, the government institution, the government leadership within the community, to have them on board to understand why you're there, what you're doing, really understand what those traditional beliefs are, and obviously work with respect and towards to understand different viewpoints of what people have to say. Obviously, there's different approaches, whether you talk to leaders or women, identifying those key influencers in the community and speaking specifically to them in a setting where it's safe and you can share that information, but also having people who are champions of your work, that are part of the community themselves. So they themselves understand what you're doing, and in their day-to-day talk about this with their neighbors and champion your work as well. Yeah. Did I miss anything? No.
No, I think you covered it. But I think maybe also to add, women feel they're the ones who get affected in one way or another. So, for instance, when we started working along Lake Tanganyika, we went there, with the hope of doing conservation. We didn't think about population health and environment. But they say, we want to be able to provide for our family, and we cannot do that at the moment because we really need you to help us with this other angle, which was for them family planning and what. And so, in this case, they actually asked us, and she showed there, this is a very remote area, and so family planning, I don't know what you call that, like services, equipment, or whatever, is not always available. And so they know it's there, but they're not accessing it. And so they wanted us to help them with that. So in many cases, women feel the pinch, and they always want to find the solution. So in most cases, it's a matter of being able to meet their unmet needs.
Was there another question, Sarah, in the back? And then we have one online.
Sarah Levitt at TNC. You've talked a little bit about the challenges in general for family planning initiatives, but could you speak a bit more about challenges related to family planning with conservation organizations?
Tara, maybe you might help me. So the question was talking about the challenges. I really highlighted the challenges with family planning in general, but not with family planning and conservation. I think I'll speak as of Tanzania, which is where my a lot of my experience lies. And I think there is very limited understanding of that link. I believe the organizations working in PHE in Tanzania are us in collaboration with Pathfinder, the Jane Goodall Institute in collaboration with Pathfinder. And I think that in terms the big programs that I know in Tanzania are currently those. Lucy, correct me if I'm wrong. Are there other PhD programs in Tanzania?
So those are the big ones.
Yeah. So the big challenges that I've heard about is that often conservation organizations don't feel that they're adequately prepared to talk about and address these issues. They might not feel like their expertise is in that, so they might shy away from that. Often they have different priorities. The challenge in working in communities like Lucy said, where we work is that they're very, very remote. So you need a lot of resources to be able to bring services to the community. So when it comes to where we work, we have dispensaries there, but they're very scarce. There are very few people working in them. A lot of the time, they don't have the knowledge of know-how, for example, to provide a wide variety of methods of family planning. They might not have the tools. So it takes a lot of coordination, a lot of resources, a lot of human capacity to be able to offer those. Tara, do you want to add maybe?
Yes.
I'll just come up here. I'm representing Pathfinder International, and we're the partner with TNC in a couple of places in Tanzania. And I've spent the vast majority of my career actually looking at that particular question for 20 years probably. So I would say that it's my experience that fear plays a huge role, has continued to play a huge role, and the more that national media in Tanzania puts attention to adding to that fear by threatening to throw people in prison or saying don't show that, and then it makes it even harder for conservation groups that try to rally people from all different walks of life and all different political backgrounds to support family planning and conservation. It makes it more challenging for them to get on board. Also, just not knowing how to do it, and then also perceiving that this is a big one. I think a perception that you may be engaging in population control and or that sort of global south, global north debate about consumption versus population. That's huge. It was the biggest hurdle I encountered at the World Wildlife Fund Network when they tried to pass a population policy, which may be really of great interest to TNC as well. And I'm sure Julia will be involved in this as well very, very shortly. I think in a couple of weeks, there's a statement that's coming out supported by the Population and Sustainability Network out of the UK. And they have worked really hard over the last year to get signatures from Global South, in particular, conservation groups, demonstrating that they support integration of family planning with conservation. And there will be several hundred signatures on this document called Thriving Together. And I hope that anyone who's interested in these issues can help disseminate that kind of messaging, because it does play a key role in obstacles, perceived obstacles. And then the last one I would just think is important for TNC to know about is that I think a lot of conservation groups think others will deal with it. But as we can see, particularly in this political environment in the US now, we cannot rely on that, and especially not in the remote places where these projects are often taking place. So thank you for letting me.
No, thank you. We're lucky to have you.
We have a bunch of questions online now, so our shy online listeners are not so shy. So let me at least let you answer a couple of these. The first one is, can you share an example of localized community benefits and conservation outcomes jointly achieved with family planning interventions?
Okay. Cara, maybe. Can you say that again?
Can you share an example of localized community benefits and conservation outcomes jointly achieved with family planning interventions?
Community benefits and conservation outcomes jointly achieved with family planning intervention.
Isn't like the Lake Victoria project one of the conservation reference bureau? I don't know anything about community benefits.
Cara, maybe we should, if you know, like specific, like even Tuungane,
Yeah.
you might know better.
We've done lots of studies. I'm sure TNC is also now. We're working hard with TNC and Tuungane in particular to try to measure those things.
Yeah.
But some of the discrete outcomes that we have found are, and some of them will be sectoral, and some of them are what we call synergistic and value added. So one of the things that really inspires me that TNC has helped us make big headway on in Tuungane with measures is looking at men's buy-in to family planning, a huge obstacle. You see all that unmet need. It's not just about access. It has one of the biggest factors is probably men protesting against just not knowing enough. So we're actually trying to measure that. So that's a big achievement in the family planning sector. In the joint sector, one of the areas that's less well studied, but definitely part of the theory in Tuungane and elsewhere, is about getting women engaged in conservation and natural resource management. There's a pretty substantial body of literature demonstrating that when women are actively engaged in natural resource management committees and groups or leadership even, that the conservation outcomes will be better. And when you have a suite of interventions, as we do in Tuungane, for example, together with the Nature Conservancy, that includes livelihoods, educating women and men about reproductive health and conservation issues, and then enabling women to actually get involved in those groups, you can really see impact. And there are more, but I think I'll stop there.
Yeah. Thank you, Cara, for being here. This really shows, I've just joined, so Cara has a lot of experience in terms of our program in Tuungane, which is around Goma and Lake Tanganyika. So sharing a little bit of our work there.
Okay, so there's three more questions online. A couple are linked and related to men, which I think might be kind of interesting. Also want to be sure we give you a little bit of time at the end to talk about the AUSDP. Okay, 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna give you these two questions that are kind of linked.
Yeah, and then I wanted to see how we can discuss.
Okay. All right. on, how do you shift cultural values such as more children equals more success, more security, given that there would be a much longer period for proving the case? So a time-related question. And the second is, what are some techniques used to bring men into the conversation in communities where there is desire for many children? I have worked with women who use birth control but keep it a secret from their husband. No, I don't think you need to repeat it because I think they can hear me.
Okay.
And they can see the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that we were talking in the last few days of like trying to integrate gender into our programming, to really include men in some of this discussion and make them see what are the benefits of family planning and sometimes smaller families that relate to them, to their wives, to their households, to their community, and some of those are the ones that I highlighted in the presentations already. But I think it's really, really important. And then the last comment about women using contraception without getting, not necessarily consent, but without their husbands knowing, and that's very often the case in Tanzania as well. Because usually family planning uptake is reliant on men being on board, unfortunately, because the wives feel that they cannot decide to use that method or decide to use contraception. There's a lot of pressure on the community for them to have children, especially straight after they're married. So men really have to be better educated on understanding what family planning is. And when it comes to healthcare, there's a lot of entry points for women to hear about contraception and family planning and other health issues, because we are the ones who take children to the health clinic to get vaccinated. We are the ones who go to the clinic to get antenatal care. We are the ones who deliver there. But men have less opportunity. So even though in Tanzania there's a high percentage of both men and women who have heard about family planning, they're not able to explain it in detail of what it does and what are some side effects, for example, understanding them completely. But I think it's a need for us to be able to include men and making them understand all different parts of the argument. And I think that's one of the challenges that I understand we're also having in Tungane, with that there are still community members who want a lot of children. So then what do you do? And I think that's not an answer that's so straightforward that I have right now. But I don't know if anyone wants to add, Lucy maybe, or Clara.
No, I think also as resources diminish and there's no more land for cultivation, increasingly we may have more acceptance, because in the past, for instance, like the biggest tribe in Tanzania is the Sukuma, and for them to have 10 children was almost a necessity because of farming labor. But as land is going down, sometimes as resources are going down, I think more and more Tanzanians will not see the need to have many children. And
it might be good because people probably can't hear you.
I was saying, as land diminishes and the number of people are increasing, it may not be very necessary to have many children, because the biggest tribe in Tanzania is the Sukuma, who used to have 10, even more children, because they were labor on farms and taking care of cattle. But looking the trend now, even the Maasai, who are known to be good livestock keepers, more youth Maasais are moving to Dar es Salaam to become watchmen, guards in the houses, and so that decreases the number of availability of children to do those kinds of work. But also it makes the community think, is the trend going to change? Even if we have 10 children and all of them want to be guards, that's not helping you with your livestock keeping, right? So I think it's slowly changing also the thinking that maybe it's not necessary to have that many livestock in the first place, and maybe it's not necessary to have those many children because even the land area to cultivate is diminishing. And there's more and more people becoming educated. More and more Tanzanians want to send their kids to better schools, you know, have better food and what have you, and that requires money. And so you can't feed 20 children if you know, the economy is too tight for you to be able to afford it.
Should we go to the discussion? Should we have time?
I think we have a couple minutes. Janet says she needs just a couple minutes at the end.
Okay.
I mean, I assume these are questions you're going to pose for people to kind of consider and think about,
Yeah.
not necessarily have it in depth.
So this is a question that I posed to myself in the position that I'm in. But also I wanted to ask for your help in terms of trying to address. So how can conservation organizations do more to promote family planning into their program? So I don't know if any of you have ideas to share or something that resonates through other projects that you've heard about.
My name is Lisa, and I work in Conservation Research Bureau. And so we have been working with TMC on some of the Tanzania work to translate some of that. And I think one of the things that have been impressive to me is how family planning has been demonstrated to be linked to resilience. So I think that's like such a big buzzword now. And the other thing is, I would say USAID, especially, you know, with the theme of journeys to self-reliance, linking, especially for USAID funded projects, how integrating, you know, what the added value is, what the financial savings, how that promotes self-reliance is going to be very important, especially when it comes to.
Okay.
Can you capture that in a short summary for the folks online? So, is it Misa? Okay, so we had kind of more of a comment, but something to sort of get people to think about from Smita at Population Reference Bureau about how well family planning and it links up with resilience, and just for people to kind of think about that as an important factor in conservation. And yeah, okay, so especially related to USAID and their new focus on resilience.
For me, I think
There's a comment, yeah,
Okay.
which I can read. There's a growing interest among environmental funders, speaking as a funder, to incorporate a gender lens into all aspects of work. And for me, family planning fits squarely into that.
Chris Giner with TNC. I'll be real quick. To me, I think it's an integral part of land use planning. The slide that was most shocking for me was that the population was projected to more than double by 2050, and with 40, I'm forgetting the number, 40% of the land currently in a protected status. It's just, there's going to be a conflict there, right? So I know, you know, I work on with some of the land use planning folks, and I know we're thinking about that, but I don't know if we've properly integrated family planning as a component of land use planning, or an add-on, or as a supplement, or we don't even really know how to think about it, but it's just something that we need to address.
Actually, following up on Chris's point, so one of the trainings that was the most instructive to me on population health environment was when we had a bunch of Africans in the room and we looked at population doubling rates of their countries, and they just freaked out, right? Because you don't know where those people are going to go. Like the Gambia is going to double in 30 years, and that's a really small country. So I do think to this point, it's not just conservation organizations. I think you actually need to look at decision makers in African government and get them to realize that they do need to act now or yesterday, really, right? But they need to actually understand population growth and things like population momentum. There are a lot of things they need to understand and how it relates to conservation.
Yeah, and I agree in terms of like advocacy and making other understand the link, because not everyone is fortunate enough to have heard about the PHE approach. There even in Tanzania, I spoke to organizations that because of the current situation, they've realized that there's a need to be able to integrate with other sectors. But it didn't come so easily. They had not heard about that concept earlier. So definitely at all levels is important. And I think also within our donor community, because we don't, unfortunately, have a lot of donors that provide resources to integrate the work. And the USAID is a great example that does, but not everyone is like that.
Okay, so we're definitely over time by a couple minutes, so I want to respect people's time. So if you need to leave, we understand, and thanks for all the great questions for folks online. I apologize that we didn't get to all of them. If people have time, we can spend another couple minutes and hear about the Africa Biodiversity Collaborative Group's work on PHE in particular. There's a task group devoted to that, as I mentioned. This is work funded by USAID. And Janet Edmonds from Conservation International could give us a quick overview.
Do you have other questions?
If anyone has any other questions for me, I'm behind after the presentation, but if you want to write directly to me, please feel free to do so. And I have lots of resources if you need to add.
Okay, I can. Yeah, and also I think if you can't find Julia's email, I think mine is on the invitation, and I will just put you in touch with Julia directly.
Yeah, sure. Just briefly, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that we even have a PHE task in Africa Biodiversity Collaborative Group. This next phase is pretty exciting. And one of the reasons is, for those of you who know USAID and biodiversity policy, they make you do a threats assessment when you have a new procurement. So we had about 20 people in a room from all those conservation organizations that you saw earlier on that slide. And when we looked at what are the threats to biodiversity across sub-Saharan Africa, population growth was one of the main ones. We went through and ranked them and everything. So I think it's pretty exciting that we're able to continue the work that we were doing under the most recent phase. And I work with Natalie Simano at World Wildlife Fund, who many of you know, and Stella Mercurio at JGI. So it's really exciting to have a great collaboration. And we're basically going to do 3 things in a really short period of time. We're going to continue to leverage work that is going on with World Wildlife Fund in Cameroon and integrating family planning into a conservation project there. And we're going to also leverage what's going on with Jane Goodall in Tanzania, I believe in the western part of Tanzania, with Pathfinder, right? Yeah, it's a new USAID project, I believe, right? Okay, so I'm sure there's many people in the room who know more about that than me. But we're definitely going to be able to look at the lessons and some of the things about community benefits of family planning, which has been discussed. There's a good amount of work already going on, and we're going to be able to take those lessons. And one of the things that we're going to do is message and advocate on family planning and the importance of doing population health environment to African decision makers, which includes donors, some USAID missions, and many others, policymakers. That's going to happen. And then we're also going to do a little bit of a deep dive. Some will find this been there already, look at indicators and really trying to figure out, I think the phrase was return on investment
for family planning and conservation. I'm not sure we want to frame it that way, but the whole idea is to relook at the indicators and how we can get a better sense of what the values are. And the discussion so far today has really been very instructive to look at the changing dynamics in a country like Tanzania and to really look at what those factors are and how it's going to affect population growth and conservation. So I hope we can draw on many of you. That's one of the reasons I asked Julia what her job description was, so we could draw her in and get her involved. But we look forward to working with you all, and let us know if you have any questions. Okay.
Thank you,
Sounds
Janet.
good?
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you all for coming today, and thank you very much, Julia. Very excited to meet you for the first time and have you here in Washington with us. And for any of the folks that are still on the phone, we're going to conclude the presentation. And thanks again for joining us online. For everyone who registered for this event, they will be sent an email from ABCG with a link to the recording. And so keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions, you can email me. And I think, at least for those of you that are left, I put your email address in the chat box. So reach out to me or to Julia. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.